Look, good morning to you. Maybe you could just shed some more light on this meeting with President Zelensky and how he will address Cabinet today and the importance of that.
Good morning. This is a really important visit for the President to the Cabinet. This is the first time that a foreign leader will have addressed a Labour government cabinet since President Clinton in 1997. And what it does is it underlines just how close the relationship between the UK and Ukraine is, and our determination to continue supporting Ukraine until they win. And that's why, as well as having President Zelensky in Downing Street today, we've been announcing a new treaty to support the faster delivery of weapons to Ukraine, creating jobs here in Britain and putting more munitions in the hands of Ukraine's frontline forces, as well as tackling the 600-strong shadow fleet that Putin has sailing the oceans, that's exporting illegally trafficked oil that he uses the profits for to buy weapons to kill Ukrainians. So it's tightening the sanctions regime, showing strong support for Ukraine and making sure that we can get as much resource to the Ukrainian front line as possible to defend against Putin's illegal invasion.
Talking about Labour's plan for defence, Sir Keir Starmer and yourself have talked about 2.5% of GDP being the target, being the aim, but you haven't set a time frame for that yet. I mean, wouldn't you say, based on everything that you just listed there, time is of the essence here? We're living in a very dangerous world. We need to know when this defence spending is coming.
You're exactly right. Time is of the essence. And that's why this week the Prime Minister launched the new Strategic Defence Review to look at the threats we're facing and, most importantly, look at the capabilities we need to deter those threats and defeat them if necessary. We know that there's capability gaps across UK armed forces at the moment. We know that the war in Ukraine means that there's a new emphasis on a different type of warfare, in particular drone warfare, and making sure we have enough munitions that can strike deeper into an opponent's territory. The UK needs more of that type of equipment. So the review will look at that, and we've been absolutely clear, we will increase defence spending. We will get to 2.5%. That will be set out by the Chancellor at a fiscal event in the future, a budget or an autumn statement. But we need the results of the defence review to start working out what shape our forces should be and how we can prioritise the investment that we need to get our forces fighting fit to deter aggression, but to defeat it if we need to.
Looking at this deal with Ukraine today, £3.5 billion involved here. Could you just explain to us how that is structured? And is that £3.5 billion given, or will it be paid back?
That's a really good question. Export finance doesn't work in the same way as, say, gifting Ukraine a weapons platform. We're not simply giving money. Export finance deals create a way of Ukraine buying equipment from the UK manufacturers that effectively guarantees that trade. So Ukraine can buy billions of pounds worth of extra munitions from UK manufacturers, supporting jobs here in the UK. That export deal makes it easier for us to be able to export, reduces the paperwork, the costs, the bureaucracy, and guarantees that income. And this is really important because we need British manufacturers to be producing more arms, not just for our friends in Ukraine, but also to fill the stockpiles that are emptying that the UK has. We've given an awful lot of weaponry to Ukraine, quite correctly, over many years, something that has enjoyed cross-party support in Parliament. And now we need to build more weapons. That's not only ammunition for artillery and small arms ammunition that can be used in the trench warfare that we're seeing in Ukraine. It means high-end missiles to make sure that we can get through Russian air defenses to support Ukraine in targeting those targets that they need to defend their country. And that's what this deal does. It helps support Ukraine and helps support British industry. So it's a double win. And it is something that will be signed by the Prime Minister later today, I think, in a real strong statement that the UK will continue to support Ukraine until they win.
Minister, so much of what you're talking about is about international relations, isn't it? Can I ask you then about the comments from the now Foreign Secretary David Lammy? These are back in 2018, calling Donald Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. He has refused to retract on those comments, but now as Foreign Secretary, it begs the question, doesn't it? How can they possibly do business together if Donald Trump becomes president once again?
Well, Donald Trump's an individual that does evoke strong opinions for people, but we've been absolutely clear that we will work with anyone that is in the White House, whether that is a continuation of the Biden administration or a new Trump administration. America is the UK's #1 ally. We have an incredibly strong and deep defence relationship, strong economic ties, and really strong cultural ties. It's in our interest and in America's interest that the UK and America works together, and it's in all our interests that we ensure that Ukraine wins. And that's why, whether it's David Lammy, the Prime Minister, or John Healey, the Defence Secretary, we're all making the case to our American friends that the support for Ukraine must continue, that we must deepen those defence relationships, and as a government that has a NATO-first policy, investing more in our NATO relationship and our NATO allies, we need all NATO allies to be spending at least 2% of GDP on defence, ensuring that Europe is better able to defend itself against any Russian aggression. And that's the arguments that Labour ministers have been making, not just in the European Political Community Summit, the summit that's been taking place over the last few days at Blenheim Palace that Keir Starmer's been hosting, but also at the NATO summit last week in Washington, making the case that we are better defended when we work together, where the relationship between the UK and America is strong, and when we've got a clear determination that Putin must not win in Ukraine, because if he wins in Ukraine, he won't stop at Ukraine.
Can I ask you briefly, we are almost out of time, but when is the Labour Party planning to add VAT on private school fees? I was speaking to parents yesterday who are very, very concerned about when this is going to happen. They work very hard to put their children through private school, concerned that this could happen in the middle of term and they'd be forced to pull their children out of school. Can you make assurances this morning that that wouldn't happen?
Well, we've been elected on a very strong mandate, and one of the policies that we had was to implement, to close the VAT exemption on private school fees and use the money that that exemption closing raises to employ 6,500 new teachers for all our state schools and make sure that we're investing in the education for all our children that attend state schools, which is the vast majority of children in this country. Because it's a VAT change that will need to be set out by the Chancellor at an event like the budget or an autumn statement. We don't have one of those in the near horizon, but there will be one coming up soon. What is important is that we don't want to shock the system. We don't want to create unnecessary delay or confusion. We've said that we will do this. It will be set out in due course about how we do that. But it's also important that we know where the money is being spent and why we are doing this. I wish we could support greater education spending from government resources. But we know that after 14 years and the economy crashing under the last government, the money isn't there. That's why we've been very clear that in our manifesto, we're not raising corporation tax, VAT, national insurance, or the taxes that the vast majority of working people pay. But there will be some tax changes, closing the loophole on private school fees, making sure that people that live in Britain but don't pay their taxes in Britain, those non-DOMs, are paying their fair share, and will use that money to support the priorities of better education and better health that we've been setting out so clearly in the general election.
Look, I'm sure you'll have seen on television and heard on radio the scenes, the riots that took place in Leeds last night. Now, that's a scene someone like me, growing up in Belfast, well used to, and there would be, you're the Minister for Armed Forces, there would have been armed forces there on the street to deal with the likes of that. I'm not saying that should be the case, but goodness me, that it was so akin. Police vehicles being set on fire, being turned over. Goodness me, what is that all about?
Well, it's just appalling behaviour, absolutely appalling behaviour. And that's why the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has condemned it so clearly last night when it was taking place. We're now working with the local police force to understand what happens with more officers to keep calm in the area. But we need to get at those people who conducted that criminal damage, who set fire to the bus, who turned over the cars. There should be absolutely no place for that type of behaviour on our streets. And everyone involved should be absolutely clear that the full force of the law will be used to find them and prosecute them for that behaviour, because that is not what we do in Britain. That's not how we raise concerns. And because of that behaviour, we'll need to be taking a look at the support that we can offer that police force. Yvette Cooper will be setting out more about what support the Home Office and the UK government can take place. But that type of behaviour is not something that we should see on any of our streets anywhere in the United Kingdom.
Well, it almost looked like recreational rioting, you know, on a summer's night. But you're saying consequences will follow. You needn't expect to be able to do that and get away with it.
Absolutely. You know, we're a nation of laws. And in Britain, we feel very strongly we have a right to peacefully protest. But what we don't have is a right to criminal damage for the disruption that we saw, for the terrorizing of the law-abiding citizens that we saw last night on the streets. That's why we need to be absolutely clear. If you set light to a bus, if you conducted criminal damage against a police car or any other type of activities we saw last night, the police will be taking action to find you and to prosecute you. That, I think, is what everyone watching your programme here will want. And it's something that's really important because this behaviour is not acceptable. It's not something, it doesn't speak to those British values that we need to protect as a country.
Loud and clear is your message. Luke Pollard is the Minister of State for the Armed Forces.